everyone. Back working on this Spirio. I'll be answering questions on the half hour and the hour, so be sure to put any comments or questions there and we'll get to them, read them out, and address them. Just going to set up my other phone here so I can see important calls coming in as needed. And we're going to get cooking on the regulation on this. This piano I think we decided the strike point should be there. We bedded the key frame. We decided we're going to reduce the key dip to the Steinway spec, which is 400 thousandths of an inch. And yeah, so first thing I'm going to do is do the key dip. It should go a lot faster. You know, the key level is pretty good on this piano. We don't need to redo all that. So we grab some punchies. And while we're doing that, I'm going to add some hardener to the hammers. So right now the piano sounds good, but it's difficult to play. It's kind of oh in this tone quality. Now a mellow piano sounds good usually in a space if you're just listening to it, but what's the problem is it's difficult to play if it's overly mellow. Okay, now this piano will probably be used mostly for the player function, I'm guessing, where it's going, so I don't want it to be too loud, but I do want it to be good still if someone plays it. I don't want someone to play and say, "Ew, I don't like that." So I might just I think we'll use some paraloid and we'll juice it up a bit. So I'm going to prep that to work, and then we'll be setting the dip in the meantime. It's always good to kill two birds with one stone where possible, right? So I've got some paraloid already mixed up. I use a pretty strong strength. Don't ask me what the ratio is. I don't remember. I wrote it down. And when I need to mix up a batch, I just do it by weight. But I can't remember. It has to do with when I fill this jar with acetone, what weight of plastic crystals I put in there. So go ahead and put this in my little Dixie cup, which serves as a great funnel for pouring into a small bottle. Okay. And I'm just going to get a little more in the bottle just in case I decide we want it. I'm going to do a slightly deeper application of this than normal, but it'll still dry very quickly. We're talking 45 minutes, which is plenty of time, you know, to regulate the piano, touch up, regulate it, and plenty of time for that to dry. Plus any lacquer that's in the hammers already will get dissolved a little bit by this acetone and then reconstituted in a stronger way. It'll probably draw it up towards the top a little bit of the hammer. That's the way I think of it anyway. So we've got this. Let's go ahead and juice these hammers a bit. And it's pretty much just across the whole thing. You know, they've really evened the piano out. It's really across the whole thing, and then we might do some on the ends to finish off later. You know, I'm going to put this on the... Nah, we'll just do it here. Let me see if I can give you somewhat of a close-up so you can kind of see to what degree I'm putting it in here. So when I get to this middle section, you'll be able to see a little closer, okay? I'm going to go ahead and carefully juice this. Kind of like I would the deep lacquer, but this won't have as much of a, it won't be as hard as the lacquer gets. And it'll dry a lot faster, as I mentioned, okay? So, this will probably make a large difference in the tone from what we were hearing to what we're going to hear. And we'll need to refine it again. But I feel good about this approach on this piano, because yeah, I don't want it to be too monstrous, but I don't want it to be too weak feeling either. I want it to make a good impression. There's someone who's really comfortable playing piano or has a certain love for a more mellow sound or feel, they would do just fine and they would just love it, right? But a lot of people don't have that comfort level, and they'll sometimes reject the sound and that feel. Okay, so I'm basically, from the crown, just letting it soak down. But before I get all the way to the wood molding, the felt itself is kind of repelling the liquid. I can see it starts to bead up on the side, and so it's not just drinking it up at that point. And I believe that they still put lacquer in these hammers when they make them initially. I imagine they still dip them, but I could be wrong. They change things all the time, you know, based on whatever they think is going to produce the best results. Okay. Yeah, this isn't drinking up very much, so they're pretty hard down below. Plus the solution might be a little thicker. So I just go until it kind of stops drinking it. That one took a little more. I was talking with a friend before I came here, and we were mentioning how it just depends on the set of hammers or the piano. Sometimes you'll get a set, you'll think, I don't need to do anything to these hammers, I don't need to harden them up or anything, and others you kind of want to, and others have a strong sound, but the tone is just improved a little bit, consolidated maybe, by deep lacquering or building it up, or just certain regions, you know, a little bit in the treble, a little bit in the bass, maybe. Just depends. Okay. So here we are. Just about through. And believe it or not, yeah, I think 45 minutes is all this needs. Treble hammers are drinking it up a little better. At least some of them were. Which makes sense based on what I was hearing. Tone of the piano. It's interesting, I am seeing some hard spots in these hammers, definitely where hardener's been added already. So I can kind of see what shape where that is. Mostly it's down deep, just above the core, so I imagine lacquer and lacquer thinner that was allowed to wick in through dipping the hammer or what have you. That's what would be my guess. So really this is just going in, on these, it's only going into about the outer 1/8 of an inch or so of the hammer layers. Okay. But we'll see what that does, and meanwhile we'll be setting dip. I'm not even going to listen to it. I know it's going to be like a dead sound right now because they're all soaking wet, right? Let me zoom out here. And let's see. Whoa, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Trying to... Okay, apparently that's as far out as it zooms. All right. I just wasn't sure. Back up. We'll get in there a little bit. Okay, let's set the dip here. I'm going to use my adjustable tool, and I'm going to set it on the sample that I set, and I will set the sample according to that. Actually, kind of like where it is. Maybe I'm going to, this little post that's in the middle can be raised or lowered. And you want to set it to where when this is flush, that's where you should put the key. So let's see if I grab my screwdriver. I'm gonna make it so that fan doesn't turn on and off and on and off. It's pretty loud. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay, I think we have it where that AC in the room's not going to turn on, so I'm not screaming at you here. Okay, I'm just going to turn that adjustment a little bit up. Let's see. See if it's down a bit. Okay, we'll try that. So I'm going to need some blue punchings and green. And some 15,000 punchings. Okay, so I've got blue, green, and a thin cardboard. So you can choose which I want to use. I like my forceps again with the ground side, so it's nice and sharp, so it gets under the punchings really well. Let's see if we add a blue. Now let's just go for the 15. Let's see if it'll hit us right on the mark, so we can kind of wholesale bring these up. This is probably pretty consistent. And that by itself wasn't enough to, that didn't even get me there. So what about 2 of them? All right. Just gonna check across a few random ones here. And down the bottom. They're all about the same. So I'm gonna just start by sticking a 15,000 in all of them, okay? So you see me do this. Just gonna start here at the ends and work towards the middle and then back. And I'm probably gonna want to do, let's see, if I remember right, I think I said actually I didn't make a distinction between the sharps and the naturals there. So I'm gonna put one in under everything. I'm gonna assume the regulation was really consistent. Put a 15,000 under everything. And I will watch the time here so we can answer questions. I went past 7 o'clock to see if anyone had any comments joining. I'll remember that I'm on C here, so let's read the comments here if there's any. Nope, that's okay. Okay, we'll continue on then. Starting to really smell that acetone actually. Kind of strong in there, but hopefully I don't pass out. Now, I decided to reduce the dip, one, because it's the manufacturer's spec for key dip. And key dip, I think, is kind of a sacred or integral, let's say, it's a crucial ingredient to that particular manufacturer's recipe of how the piano should be regulated. Now, they didn't have it that way out of the factory, so they obviously allow for some leeway there. And so I chose it because I can repeat faster, and also I don't need a super loud piano here. You know, I lose maybe some power because if the distance is shorter from the hammers to the strings, you can't accelerate the hammer over as great a distance, so you lose a little power perhaps. Same thing with the key. If the key's a little more shallow, you can't accelerate as long, so you might lose some power for both of those things. And what we have to do to make the action work, if I decrease the key dip, I usually then need to decrease the distance between the hammer and the strings in order to compensate for that less key dip, so that the mechanism still runs through its full cycle and works properly, where the jack trips out all the way from the knuckle and then it's able to reset. I don't often find myself redoing dip on these pianos. You know, maybe just usually checking the blow, just refining it, maybe checking the jack position a little bit, which we'll do a little in a second. But in this case, I think it made things a little better. First time I saw, I've learned a lot of my technical skills just from little clips of people working in a factory, or just seeing someone through a tour, or just little clips, little videos that say, oh, now we're doing this, or here's this worker. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. The first time I saw somebody doing the sharp dips, you know, where you just had a tool and didn't even need to look, and you just put them in there so fast. I was like, wow, that was so neat. I was like, I've got to learn that skill. So I practiced it, and that's kind of part of my arsenal. I think the secret is to take something that, an adjustment that most people might find a big deal or something that's difficult to do, and find a way to make it not such a difficult thing to do, not such a big deal, and then you're more likely to adjust it the way it needs to be, and the piano's the better for it. So the two main things like that I looked at when deciding where to regulate this piano was how far the key went down and how far the hammer traveled. That, in a nutshell, is regulation. That's it. All the other little timing things, you know, they help with the timing of escapement and things like that, but you know, or they help with resetting the jack. But really the bulk of it is just how far is the key going down, is it consistent, and then how far is the hammer traveling. And your setting was, if you watched my streams about where we measured the Yamaha, all the dimensions of the parts, you know, we were talking about the action ratio, which is, you know, you've got three main levers, right? You've got the key, then you've got the whip-in, and then you've got the hammer on a shank. Those are the three main levers in the piano action, and they work together to make the hammer heavier to your finger, basically. But they also make it so that the hammer travels a much greater distance than the key, which, if we can push the key with enough force, makes it so that we can accelerate the hammer very, very fast, because it's traveling about 4.5 times the speed. Oh, I messed up this. This was already set, this D. The hammer's traveling about, you know, 4.5 times faster than the key. So we put an X in and we get X times 4.5 as far as power is concerned. So that helps the piano be very dynamic, right? Which makes it a great instrument for expression. Anytime something is a dynamic curve instead of, you know, just a linear thing, it kind of brings out this musical gesture sense in us, and we react to it. We say, "Oh, I can communicate with this." You know, it puts the drama into the playing. At least that's my take on it. And that's what I enjoy about the piano. So anyway, with the action ratio, you know, look, this key on the Steinway, the key's traveling down about 400 thousandths of an inch. And in this case, the hammer's traveling about 41 millimeters, okay? So you could think of it like this. The 400 thousandths of an inch is a little more than 10 millimeters. Okay, just a little bit, I believe, right? What's 10 millimeters? I think it's like 390 something, 393. And then I set, with my sample, I set the blow distance to 41 millimeters from the string. So it's roughly, you know, the ratio is roughly 1 to 4, if I'm saying that right. So 1 unit of movement in the key equals 4 units of movement in the hammer. And I have a friend who's very smart. His name, and he's well known in the industry, and he says everybody says the ratio's wrong. It's not. And I always forget which way is the correct way he says to say it, whether it's 1 to 2 or 2 to 1 or 4 to 1 or 1 to 4. But if we go from the input arm, if we go from the input to the output, it's 1 to 4, okay? If that's the correct way to put it. So anyway, I can tell the action ratio on this action based on how I'm having to regulate it relative to another one. So I know I'm decreasing the dip, decreasing the blow. That means this action ratio is a lot lower than some other pianos. So in other words, it's not making the hammer as heavy relatively as some actions do. So the result of that is it's a relatively lighter feeling action. So when we were looking at the Yamaha 7-foot versus the Steinway 7-foot, we found that also between the two, the Steinway was geared to be a lighter feel, right? A lower gear. Like if you're pedaling your bike, so you could get faster acceleration, but maybe in the end, not as much overall speed or power. Maybe that's because we don't need it on the Steinway as much because it produces a lot of sound and we can harden the hammers and things like that. And the Yamaha was geared higher so that, it was a little heavier feeling, but you felt, it felt really dynamic. You get some real snappy gestures out of it by just a little bit of change in force, and you get a greater change in output. Why am I saying all this? I guess I'm talking about it because we're adjusting the key dip, which is how far the key goes down. And again, for me, regulation, key dip versus hammer travel. Key travel and hammer travel, that's the bulk of regulation. So say, well, what about key height? What about key leveling? Well, all the key height does is set up how much dip you can have. Okay. People say, what about let off? Well, let off has a definite important function so that the jack can escape and not block up against the string, block the hammer up against the string. But if you think about it, let off is really just setting the upper limit of how far the hammer is being pushed. Yeah, the smell of this acetone is kind of getting to me. I won't mind when it's all flashed off and gone, that's for sure. So have any of you regulated an action before? Is it something you do regularly? What about voicing? Have you done much voicing? I know that might be kind of weird to put on a public chat, oh, I do this or that, but if you're willing to just kind of share what you're into and your level of exposure into this, or maybe it's like, I didn't know this existed, or I'm a concert technician, I'm doing it all the time, and welcome to you all, really. So plus it's nice to have something going on, maybe conversation, whatever, when you're doing key dip, because let's be honest, right, this is kind of the pits of regulation. This is like, right, it's the paperwork, the piano technician's paperwork. It's a part you don't want to have to do, but it's very, very necessary to get it right. Oh, that jumped away from me. You know what? I think so. I can hear everything's been strengthened quite a bit in tone already as that stuff dries, but the very ends don't have much going on. That's probably because, well, either that's probably just because they're not all the way dry yet. I'll stick with that story. We'll see, but I might end up having to do something more to get them a little harder. So much of getting into this work and being able to do it well and confidently is just having the right tools. You know, when I'm introduced to a new concept or tools, I'm like, well, that's great, but where can I get that tool? So to me, like if someone introduced what they're doing, but they don't help you, they don't facilitate to help you have the same tools, there's no way you can apply what they're doing because, you know. So my thought is I'm going to provide, so, okay, to do a good job, you need three things. The desire to do a good job, the commitment to do a good job. Two, you need the correct information, how to do the job. And three, you need to have the correct tool for the job. And so my thinking is that I'll kind of differ from other people who are providing content or learning opportunities as far as piano work is concerned, where I want to provide the how-to information for free in the form of YouTube, you know, videos and streams or whatever. Just kind of be an open book that way, and then and hopefully fuel the desire and the interest, you know, as people learn more and get the confidence. Oh, I can do that, you know. Sorry, I'm just listening as we're doing this too. And then I was thinking, you know, I might, where if I have a tool or I have a connection to have a tool made that would facilitate the work that I could then sell, you know, that's my goal basically. And not to have like every tool in the world available or supply. I don't want to turn into a piano supply house, you know, but maybe just have a few things that will help support what I'm doing here and our business, but also help support the technicians in providing the correct tool and good information, how to use it to a great advantage, you know, working on pianos. Tell me what you think about that. I don't know if anyone's chiming in right now, but is that a good strategy? Is that helpful to you? Is that a service that you, would benefit from? Or if not, what spin would you put on it? What would you do in my place, you know, to support your time and effort in conveying information? Because I do want to do that, but also, be able to kind of give a lot in the way of service and open things up to people. So anyway, something to write about, something to think about. Okay, that hardener's hardening, it's doing its job. We've got a rough set of the dip. Let's check at the dip. Let's check on the dip really carefully. Let's really set each one just bang spot on. So if it's not already there. So I'm going to be putting punchings out based on what I see on my jig here. If I need to add a blue or a green or whatever, or if I need to take some out, we can do that too. I don't think I'll need to take any out based on what I was seeing from the keys before. So we've added about in total about, oh, let's see, what we put in a 15,000th punching, and then we're maybe adding another 10 thousandths. So 25 to 30 thousandths, we've decreased the amount of key travel by about 35,000. So that tells me, you know, we're setting this at 400 thousandths of an inch. So these were set at about 435, 425. That's a little deep. I think 420 is kind of common. You'll see that one. This one's another 15 for sure. And if you haven't seen me do this thing, I like to look at my gauge and then set a punching on a corresponding note. This is a D. I'm going to set it on the D, an octave below. It's out of the way of the gauge as I move along, yet and then when I go back through, it works really well for, it's out of the way when I put them back in the, when I put them under the keys. I just think it's a real slick way of doing it. And, okay. And I set this at a real hard 400 thousandths of an inch deep. That means, to me, what that means is, some people will say, well, we need 10 millimeters dip on this piano, but because those punchings underneath are kind of squishy, you could make it 10, you could make it 13, you could make it 9, depending on how hard you push. So I think really you need to say 10 millimeters deep with 400 grams of pressure or whatever, you know. I think Yamaha's attempted to do that in the past. I don't know if they still teach that way, but they'd say, okay, when it's this many grams, that's our dip. Okay, this is a B. Let's see, I think I put that in the wrong one. No, I didn't. Okay, that's just kind of over checking it. On the end keys, oh, you can drop this. On the end keys, you can just push them down, and you can see that one goes deeper than the other. So you're like, okay, I need probably a blue on that. Okay. Just kind of eyeball it, and it'll get closer and closer, and then in the end we fix them by feel. But right now by feel won't serve us very well because we're decreasing the key travel, okay? And if you've heard me talk about the shelf, if you push down to just before the hammer, the jack's going to escape from the hammer. On a grand piano, when you push right here, there's a kind of a shelf you come to of resistance. Excuse me. Then you push through that, and there should be a small step before the key hits the felt punching underneath. And if there's like no shelf at all, no step, that means it doesn't have enough aftertouch. If there's a big step, that means it has too much aftertouch. And right now, it wouldn't be very practical to push to feel that aftertouch because it's very, very minimal because we decrease the amount of key travel, but we haven't compensated for that yet. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start the hammer higher up towards the string so that when we push the key, it's going to reach the string sooner in the keystroke than it was before. So we're going to end up, it's going to hit that resistance point earlier and then have a bigger follow through after, a bigger step after that point. And we call that aftertouch, okay? But so I'm not going to check it by feel is what I'm saying until I set those hammers up higher. Then it'll be, right now it's so minimal, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between one or the other because they're pretty consistent. But anyway, that's what we're gonna get to that. So right now we're gonna stick these under, and I'm gonna be answering. I'll be looking at comments, questions here in just in like a couple minutes. So if you have anything you want to mention, yeah, definitely put it up there. Okay, what did I do with my tool? Here it is. I think this is it. Okay, so I'm just going to take the green punching, the cloth punching on the top if possible, and just stick these papers right underneath. That way if I want to backtrack, it's easy to backtrack, to that small degree, okay? And it's easy, I put my papers on the notes that I want to put the, here's an E. I want to put a green and an E. That's easy for me to know which ones I need to do something on. My punching's just right there handy. So it works out to do half the keyboard at a time this way pretty well, especially since you're sitting usually with a bench in the middle. A lot of people talk about regulating a piano on the workbench. I do not like doing that. Maybe in a factory setting someone could get it to work fine, but all the parameters you'd have to set to get it even somewhat close to what you're doing, gosh, you put it in the piano, it's going to be a little different for the most part. Now the one thing that I do on the bench is key leveling usually. And I find if I do that, it's close enough that things are great in the piano and it's a little more convenient. But a lot of people have very ornate stations they've set up, ways of measuring where the string height is. But the truth is, by the time you figure out all the information you need to set that up, you know, you've wasted a lot of time, I feel like. Okay. I feel like I have a stray blue punching there from something. I might have overdone it on some of these, but we'll find out. You know, I'm not even going to check them yet. I'm just going to go and I'm going to go ahead and look at the bass half and put punchings under that half. And that will, you know, at that point then my keyboard's going to be a lot more consistent than it was over the whole keyboard. If I got interrupted and forgot where I was, you know, I'm okay because it's kind of consistent across the whole keyboard. And it's that much better than it was. That's one way to look at it anyway. Okay. I'm just kind of listening to how that's hardening up, not checking what I did with the dip or anything. But it's 7:30 here. Let's take a look at the see if there's any comments on the chat here. Okay, we've got a comment. Let me. Okay. Paul B says your 3 tenets of desire, knowledge, and tools are good. But you also need the technical ability that probably comes from reps, for sure. Yep. Yeah, I just like those 3. You know, I guess that's the foundation, and from there you can do a good job, right? If you're determined, you'll get to the point to build those skills to do that. But that's good. And those aren't my tenets. Those come from Leroy Edwards, who taught for Yamaha classes years and years and years. It used to be called the Yamaha Little Red Schoolhouse. Paul B. also says, speaking of technical ability, any tips for chromatic scales? You've got mad chops. Everyone always says that. And honestly, to my brain, you know, when you practice something a lot, it doesn't seem like you're going as fast maybe as you actually are. But that's kind of like, it's like something I'm proud of is that people who really know what they're doing on the piano, they'll say, wow, you've got great chromatic scales. It's because I'm doing them all day, right? Whatever you practice makes perfect. And I'll do it with my left hand. I'll do it with tools in my hand, you know, where I'm just doing it. But here's a tip. It's just fingering, okay? So you may know your fingering, so this may be boring. But piano tech, this is a piano tech piano lesson, okay? So you've got your patterns of the black notes and the whites, okay? So we're going to use a fingering, pretty much almost all the white notes we're going to hit with our thumb, okay, our one finger. And then we're going to hit the black notes pretty much all with our third finger to start out. Except here, where there's 2 white notes together, then you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2. So that's just one chromatic fingering. And from there, it's allowing, being flexible enough and engaging with your arm enough so that you're not having to reach that third finger down a bunch. Your wrist doesn't have to go like this. It's just smooth. And then at the end, you can use all your fingers adjacent. So 1 3 1 3 1 2 3 1 3 1 3 1 2 3 1 3 1 2 3 1 3 1 3 1 2 3, and etc. It's a real neat pattern that I got introduced to when I was like 8, and so. And then from there, if you just practice doing it evenly, if you voice pianos all the time, you'll have it down just fine. Anyway, so yeah, so someone told me I need to learn La Campanella, or something like that. But anyway, thanks, Paul. So let's see. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue on. I'll check the chat, every half hour, an hour, on the half hour and the hour. So if you have stuff to say. Okay. Okay, we're gonna do the lower half with the gauge of the keyboard. We're gonna be putting cardboards in as needed. That one needs like 2 15s, my word. It needs the blue probably. And I've said this before too. When it comes to dip, and if you have to err on one side or the other, maybe on the shallow side a little bit or the deeper side, go with the deeper side. The key will work better. Okay? So if you have to err on the deeper side. That's my philosophy. And here I'm just, by experience and what I've seen, how it's changed, choosing which punching thickness to put in there. And I might be wrong, right? But it's not a big deal to switch it out in the end here. So when I work, I'm like a mad Swedish chef on the Muppets, throwing punch-ins everywhere. Verdi-heebie, but it's pretty fun. We're going to do 2 15s. And in the shop, that's not a bad thing. You just pick up the broom. In a home, it's not a bad thing unless someone gets like, what are you doing? But then I have my little shop vac that can suck those up really quick. So hopefully I do that before anyone's worried about how conscientious I am there. Okay. We're going to put this in there. The bass is needing a little bit more change than the treble did. Let's see. The green on that one. So it might take us another pass on the bass than it does down there, up there in the treble. So put this here, and that needs a couple cardboards, I think. So, if I do cardboard, I'll pick up the whole thing and put it on the bottom. Okay. Oops. Dropped my punching sandwich there. I use my ear a lot too when I'm going along, just to kind of track where I'm going, I'll listen to the notes of the scale almost neurotically, a little bit, but it does help if I have to look away or, I can remember where I was. In this case where it has a blue, I'll put it on top. I'll just stick the whole sandwich on top. call here. I'll just mute the chat for a minute and take this call. I'll be right back to you in a moment. Okay, just putting your sound back on here. Just gotta stay connected to home. You know, these evenings I'm working. A lot of you have commented like, you know, how can you be working so much? I don't know. I mean, it's the reality of what I have to do right now. I hope you're not offended that I'm sharing it with you, but I'd be doing it anyway. Now you notice I'm only doing the, I did the naturals. I put like a 15 cardboard under the black notes, but I'm not checking them. I'm going to check them by feel to fine tune them once we set the hammered line where we want. Okay. Now I haven't checked these yet. I'll show you this gauge up close. Let's see, we'll zoom in here. I'll kind of show you this gauge up close. So this one, it's just recessed just a little bit. I'm gonna stick the blue one there. That one's a little bit high. The post is a little high, actually, on that one. I want to take the blue out. When I take out, unless it's like a lot that I'm doing at once, I'm gonna do it right then. So I treat taking out differently than putting in there, and that's what I'm looking for. It's just on my tool anyway. It works well because it's kind of beveled right there, where I see the bevel going down just a little bit, and then the post is right at the bottom of that bevel. And let's see, we've lost it here, haven't we? The lighting's dark, isn't it? But maybe you'll see it once we get up here, out of the shadows. Out of the shadows, hopefully, in a moment. But this one needs a blue. I'm going to make note of that. Boy, it's just not going to... Oh, maybe it's me shading it. There you go. Anyway, I hope you can see that a little better. That one's a little bit deep for what I want. But, you know, you might get a tool that reads a little differently than this anyway. I got this from Wessel, Nickel and Gross, and the newer ones I've seen people that I work with get this, there's no bevel there, so it's just straight. But This one with the bevel, it's kind of nice. I can do kind of a feel too. You know, if it feels the same or if it feels more shallow. Like that one feels a little more shallow. So I would, in that case, take one out, but not much. Just like a green maybe. If there's a green to be had, or maybe a blue. And I'll trade a blue for a green, and that's the same as taking out a green. Oops, I lost my cloth punching. Let me go grab that. Okay, where are you, cloth punching? Let's see what that looks like now. It's good. It's good. That's a little deep, so I'll add a green under that one. And that one's a little, let me see if I lower this. Yeah, I'm just going to keep it where it is. You'll just have to believe me though if it's too much in the shadows. Sorry about that. I'll put a green under that one. It's just a little, the post is just a little deep in it. That one's okay, but kind of the same thing. Another green. The green. And that one's good. And then for the end, I'm just going to, right here on these keys, I'm going to push them down. Go to the shelf and push down and see if they're level. They're pretty level. So I like that. And they feel the same amount of step afterwards. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and stick these punchings in. Zoom out a bit. Stick those in there. Get this out of my way. All the notes that have a punching in them, I'll pick A to A here. There's an F, so this F. Then we'll check down in the bass. Just for a change of scenery, I'll move you to the bass side here. We'll see how we did. I'll check my sample to kind of just confirm what it was looking like, and then go from there. Blue, green, blue. That one's perfect. Well, that one needs a cardboard still. So I'm happy with the treble already. It's done, but this one I'm gonna have to do one more pass like I thought, just to make sure it's right where we want it. That one I'll do a green, just a little bit. A keyboard is so nice when it's all when the keys are all traveling the same. Boy, it really makes a difference to the feel. If you want to improve the touch of a piano and the tone, do that. Was that a G or an F? I don't remember. That was a G. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit out of there. It's just a little high. Okay. That one's a little high too. But you know, we were putting lots of punchings in these. They were pretty low, so it's a little harder to hit the mark sometimes. Speaking of Mark, he was out sick today, so he wasn't able to help me film a little bit when I was servicing pianos, but okay.
cardboard on that one. Might be a bit much. Perfect. I'm going to call that good. Remember, err on the side of a little deep if it's got to go one way or the other. Okay. And check the two end keys. The bottom one's higher. It doesn't go down as far, so I'm going to take some out of that. I'm going to take the cardboard out of that because it was quite a bit more shallow. Now if I go to the shelf and push them down, now they're even. Okay, I'm going to fill in these punchings. And check my messages here. Someone's trying to get hold. Just heard something a little weird on that key. I was checking it. I think we're fine. Okay. Okay, we're already done with the treble half. When a key doesn't go down too deep, it's easier to play and not make mistakes, and especially if it goes down really uniformly. It's the adjustment, it's the regulation adjustment that I call, it's the one where you help the pianist make fewer mistakes. That's kind of fun to be able to do that. Like I can be a lot more accurate than normal. That's pretty good. So okay, here's my check, maybe hopefully my final pass down here. I am getting a lot of shadows today with the lighting in here, unfortunately, but so be it. These are all perfect. We got them. Someone was mentioning technical ability to execute some of these adjustments and things. And yeah, that's definitely a thing. But on a piano, like you get the opportunity to practice minimum 88 times with most adjustments, right? So it becomes a lot easier that way. Okay, let's see where our let's see where we are time-wise. About on the hour coming up, I'll answer any questions or respond to any comments that you might put in the chat. Okay, I've decreased the amount of key travel, especially in the black notes. And so now I'm going to check the jack positions just real quick and set the hammers where I want. I think I'll check the springs too real quick, just to make sure they're consistent. Not too strong, not too weak. Okay. Let's see if I can zoom this out any. All right, that's a little bit zoomed out, right? Okay, good. Good, yeah. So this is my spring adjustment tool. It's got a little groove in there. And I can pop the springs out. And I can check. I'm going to start way over here and just go down
I want them plenty strong, and they are. And even if they're a little almost on the side of overly strong, I'm okay with that. It means it will repeat really well, especially with the player system. Any help we can give it, and sometimes, I mean, it has really difficult repertoire recorded, and you think like difficult for a person to play, and difficult for a person to play on a piano that's not regulated well. And so sometimes giving it a little more pep on these player pianos with the springs can help those songs that have repeated notes to not fail. Especially, I mean, the user has the opportunity to decrease the volume to very, very quiet, way beyond what a human could play for that kind of repertoire. And so, like, if a human can't, and we're expecting the machine can, we kind of have to supercharge the repetition just a little bit on these. I will say, I would favor hammers almost on the verge of double striking, if that's fair to say, then rather than a piano that doesn't repeat well or doesn't follow you very well. So I might start from a place that, but that being said, the area, I know there's a zone in the piano that's more prone to the hammer's double striking, because if these springs are too strong and the hammer doesn't catch on the back check, which is the gold part, the yellow part back behind the hammers here, when we play a note, it catches, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm letting it catch, and then I'm letting go of the key so slightly and slowly, and then that repetition spring kicks in, so the jack can slip back in place so it can reset, okay? But if it doesn't catch on that back check, then it's basically bouncing free, right, with the strength of that spring, like so. So if if it's too strong, you can get it increases the chance of double striking, but it's mostly in that tenor range. And so knowing that, sometimes I'll just set most other things a little stronger and just go a little bit more tame in the tenor, and hopefully that solves the problem. Plus, a lot of the sparkly repeated notes in classical repertoire anyway are up here in the treble in the melody area, the traditional melody area. And so, sorry, this one I made too strong. Whoa, it's really not toning down for me. Yeah, so it's kind of nice if the springs are a little bit more peppy up here. I used to wonder, like, why is everyone talking about repetition, repetition, repetition? At regulation classes and so forth. I'm like, there's not that much repertoire where you just repeat. It's not like that's the pinnacle of piano performance, is fast repeated notes, right? But it's an indicator that the action resets as fast as it possibly can, okay? So it's an indicator kind of like that the action's working really, really well. It doesn't say anything though about the voicing or the power of the action, right? So some adjustments, if you kind of float them one direction or another, they can increase repetition or decrease it. They can increase power or decrease it. And when the technician kind of becomes familiar about those consequences of changing this adjustment this way or that, and what it's going to do to the musical expression of the piano, I think that's where you can really start to do some good for a really fine pianist. If they're struggling to produce something on a certain piano, you can possibly be of assistance by being familiar with, oh, you want more power, well, I can do the 1, 2, and 3, and that will all contribute to that sense, Okay, here we go. So most of these springs, especially here, I'm pepping them up a little bit, making them a little bit faster response. Okay.
Let's see, what time are we at? Are we at question time? Just about. About another minute or so. I'll check the chat. Let's see, I'm going to do this section now. So this repetition spring, it puts a force on a lever that pops the hammer up like what you're seeing. But it's a butterfly spring, so it has a lower half too. There's two parts to it that oppose each other. So the mechanism the hammer will come down and it'll compress that spring. And then when you let go, it goes boing. And the effect is that it pushes down on the back of the key and up on the hammer so that the jack can go right back where, this is the jack where it can go right back under the hammer to fire again. Now, if the springs are way too strong, it doesn't feel good to the pianist. It kind of gets in the way. It's shoving too hard down on that key. When you release the notes, it's like you have to hold the notes down more firmly because it's pushing against you to keep the hammer in check. So it doesn't feel as at rest as much, as restful to play, I should say. So we try and strike the happy medium, I think, with a fairly fast spring, but still smooth. This one's a little slow, a little tame, I should say. It's not slow. Some people say, oh, we're going to set the springs a little hotter, right? I think you can guess what that means, right? Context. Or they might say, oh, Yamaha springs, repetition springs are set a little hotter than other pianos. All right. Dare we even check the chat? Does anyone have any questions, comments? Let's see. Maybe everyone's tired of pianos this week and is off doing other things, which is fine. Okay. All right. Paul says again. Paul B says, what does your family think of you working such long hours in your shop? Yeah, they don't like it. I mean, I'm okay with it when we got to do what we got to do, but it doesn't always work like it. It kind of ebbs and flows, and sometimes I have to put in more work than others, just depending on what's going on, deadlines and such. So, what should I say? Last week was atypical, but on average these days I'm working. There's a lot of work to do, which is a blessing. And our family's kind of at a stage, everything from teenagers on down to toddlers, where, we're kind of at a costly stage in our family. So it's a good time to work while the sun shines, make hay while the sun shines, while I have health to do it. But we try and balance it out. I don't work it all on Sundays. If I had my way, I would never work Saturdays. But in a way, like I have friends, who come from other countries or whatnot, or I grew up in California. I had friends. A lot of people, their families had to work nonstop all the time just to put food on the table. I'm not at that point or anything for sure, but in a way it makes me feel a little bit less, I don't know, like I'm willing to work hard when it's needed, and it makes me feel better about those who have to work so much all the time. Of course I try and help people out where I can, but yeah, I try not to do this all the time. But I'm also running a business, and it's I'm ultimately responsible for it, and sometimes you just gotta work more. And I find ways to enjoy it, right? Like doing the stream or I find ways to enjoy it, and then we try and find ways to enjoy each other at home. Okay, here we go. So I am setting these a little hotter than where they were. Which will give just a little bit of an edge with repetition. The other thing I'm doing besides just making them hotter is making them even, right, from one to another. So that'll provide a consistency note to note. All right. I said teenagers to toddler, but we also have one in college. And as you know or may not know, that child expenses don't end when they go to college. Okay. See, look how slow this one is. If you can see that. Let me see if I can put that there. It's quite slow. And this is like worst note, you know, for double striking, but I'm going to pep it up a little more than that. I think we'll be fine. And if I change my, if I'm wrong, I'll eat my words and readjust it the way it needs to be adjusted. But I think we're fine to make it a little bit hotter there. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, last week was atypical though. I worked evenings about 3 nights more than I would normally during the week. So normally I'll do a couple evenings in the week. And also sometimes on Saturdays it's a chance to get my kids working with me and they can earn some money. So I'll take them into the shop on Saturdays and kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But don't ask me too much about it because then then I'll be like, oh, why am I working? And I won't be able to get done what I need to. In this business, there are definite times that are busier than others, you know. And then a lot of people will go on vacation, like in the summer, June, July, and so sometimes things can really slow down as far as tunings and things like that, just depending. And we're kind of diversified in who we serve, so that it doesn't slow down as much as it used to, but I do kind of find myself, if I want to go on vacation in the summer or whatever, you know, I find myself kind of completing more projects hopefully before we do that, so I don't have to worry as much when I'm gone that it's going to mess up the business cash flow too bad. So put in a little work now for a little more relaxation and peace down the road. Okay. Yeah, pretty much wholesale. I'm making these hotter, a little faster on the rebound. That'll make it easier for the jack to return because the spring also is what allows the jack to return. It's spring loaded. It's attached onto that spring. So the spring really, if I think about it now, it kind of does 3 things at once. It pulls the jack back into position and holds it there. It pops the hammer up so that the jack can can go back under. And then it also puts a force downward on the key. I mean, it's pretty brilliant. Pretty brilliant. I don't know who invented the repetition spring idea. That would be interesting to know. Okay. This is pretty slow coming up. Oh, let's see, maybe you can't see that. I'm going to strengthen that guy a little bit. Let's see what we have here. What was this? Okay. Strengthen him just a bit. These springs have a groove that they kind of go into under that repetition lever. That's where they live. And if you don't get them back in that groove, then it can slide out and then the note won't play because the jack doesn't have the force to return, doesn't have the force to reset. So sometimes if you have a note that just seems dead, it won't play on the grand, you'd look there, or you'd look to see if something caused that spring to, be detached from the part in a way. It's common for old pianos for a glue joint to fail where that glues in. So yeah, can be a problem place. These down at the very bottom are just right for what I wanted, except for that bottom one. Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, got the springs set, and now what I want to do is check the jack position. Yeah, again, like when you're prepping a new piano, this has mostly been done for you, right? It's been done 1, 2, 3 times already in the process of putting the piano together. So really it goes faster than if you just are putting new parts on and starting from scratch, okay? Okie doke. So with the jack position, it's a screw here and it'll adjust the jack front to back so that it it pushes on the knuckle at the optimal place, okay? If it was too far back or too far forward, it wouldn't lift it as well. So the springs, this front to back jack position, and then the next one I'm going to do, which is how high that balancier is. Those are kind of the 3 things you need to prep before you can set your hammer line consistently. And it's probably already in place well enough on this piano that I could just set the hammer line and call it good. But this, going through it like this, will help me make the touch more consistent, and it will also catch any outliers that might be problematic with repetition or, So much with the piano, you're just kind of preparing against what might happen. That key might be struck, and it might be struck in that way. And you don't know if it is, but you got to have them all ready. There's so many parts. So a lot of screws to turn here. This is one that can crick the neck, so I've tried to learn how to do it in a more body-friendly way, where I'm just kind of looking to my left, down one side of the action, looking to my right, the other side. For this one, doing it on a bench doesn't seem to help it be any more comfortable. It's almost more comfortable for me on my lap right now. It can sometimes be tricky to get your tool on the screw because you're reaching through some parts. Then it's hard to line it up right, but Some pianos are worse than others at that. It can be a real pain on some. Steinways aren't so bad. Actually, they're pretty good that way. It's pretty easy to reach through the way they are. Okay, let's see here. Let's see, so if anyone's joining or hasn't been, I was curious to know if anyone kind of watching in here has regulated a piano before, or learning to, hoping to, you know, what level of kind of interest or involvement you have in this kind of work. Just kind of curious who I'm talking at. Okay, this is good, good. Then I kind of look down the other side of this as we, you know, set the jacks this way, put my head the other way. Yeah, so I like to think of these regulation adjustments in terms of what will this affect? Will it musically, what's the symptom musically? Will it affect, you know, will I notice it? Will I not notice it? Some of the things you don't notice individually, some of the adjustments, it's more like a collective effect combined with other adjustments, you know, that will allow you to perceive something is better or worse in the action. But some things directly affect how that piano feels under the pianist's fingers. So this particular adjustment of the jack, the musical benefit of this, I would say, would be better repetition and a feeling of having traction on the key, you know, as you're playing it. Okay. I like to think, okay, will such and such adjustment give me more power, less? Some adjustments, like where the let off is, will give you more control in soft playing, okay, and a more intense sound. That's another thing, is how does it affect the sound, or does it noticeably? A deeper key dip will affect the sound somewhat, the way the sound comes out as the pianist plays. It'll affect how easy it is to play scales versus how comfortable it is to play big chords, you know. I kind of just like to become familiar with all that so that I can, you know, if I'm watching someone play and they don't like something, I can kind of pick up on maybe what might be bothering them. About done checking this one. Okay, so that's there. Now, I'm going to adjust, like I was telling you, I'm going to bring the tripod down at a level more that might help you see what we're talking about now. Okay, so now I'm going to adjust the balancer height. Okay, the balancer, also called the repetition lever, is this lever right here. And you remember I was telling you about the butterfly spring that's there to push it up. You know, once the hammer goes into check, watch, that lever will be compressed. So just a little bit. So the spring is loaded. I let go of the key slightly, and then that spring release, when the hammer releases off the back check, that spring is allowed to pop open. And then simultaneously the jack, zoop, goes under the knuckle. Right, and you notice this one kind of slow, right? But that's kind of normal. It's not going to go, it's not going to go all the way under the knuckle until the key's lifted to a certain height. But what we want to see is what is the height of this lever, this button here can control the height at rest. So we want to see, does the jack go in easily? I'm going to trip the jack out with my finger just gently and see if it returns. That one does. Okay, that returns all the way. So it's a little slow, but I don't need to adjust it differently. So that's how I test the height of the repetition lever, by winking the jack out. And if it doesn't return all the way under the knuckle, let me show you a bad case just for fun. I'm going to turn the repetition lever down. That movement lowered this lower, okay? So the jack's sticking up between this window. Now, if I wink the jack, it's getting stuck. It's stuck in front of the knuckle, right? And it doesn't go back under to play. So I'll go ahead and raise that back up. Still need to go a little further. There, now it goes underneath, okay? So I'm just going through and I'm looking kind of from the side or through a little window here. And also feeling with my finger, I can feel if it goes back under all the way or not, or gets caught. It has a certain bump to it if it gets caught. And some screw adjustment, you get used to, okay, if I turn this screw to the counterclockwise, which way is the thing actually going to move, Some are direct and counter and pretty intuitive. Others are counterintuitive and kind of the opposite of what you might think. This one, if I turn the screw down, it actually lowers the front of this, which is nice. Wrap your head around that one, how it does that as you look at this button. If I turn that screw down, how does it lower this? Okay. That's another thing. If you want to do this kind of work, you want to really have your head wrapped around, okay, when I turn it this direction, this will be the result, and this is why. I'm really visual, so I'll have a picture kind of the parts in my head and how they're working, even when I can't have a full view of them. So one problem, if you'd think, well, if we want that jack to go under really fast, just put that lever up really high, and then the jack's totally free. But the problem is then at rest, the hammer, the knuckle, the weight of the hammer is just floating on this spring-loaded thing, wobbly like, and it doesn't come to a firm resting point. So you can't set your starting point of the hammer very well. You want to be able to have that be stable. We call it the hammer line, right? Because it's a line across the top when they're all lined up. So you want a stable hammer line. In order to have a stable hammer line, you got to have the weight of the hammer resting on the jack a little bit and the repetition lever, but not so much that the jack can't return underneath. So it just kind of barely scrapes the knuckle when I wink it out. And I can feel that resistance. That's one of the things that helps me set this. Different, Yamaha sets it a little differently. I think they teach you feel right here, and there should be a certain gap under the between the jack and the repetition lever. Again, this piano's been regulated really well already. It's mostly just kind of checking through things, just fine tuning just a bit. Kind of like the tuning. The tuning on the piano is pretty good already, right? It's not way off, but I still need to tune it before we play it for it to perform at its best. Check that one again. That one might be a little too high. Nope, it was good. Okay. So I know you can't see at the camera as much, but I'm just carrying on doing what I said I was doing on that. Let's see, 8:30 here. I'll check in 5 minutes or so. I'll check the chat if anyone has anything they want to say or ask or put forward. Okay. These are all looking really good. This is an adjustment that usually comes in just fine, you know, out of the box on these Steinways. When you change the spring, it changes how much force the spring is putting up on that repetition lever. So if I were to set this just right, you know, the jack is scraping against the knuckle on the way out and it returns all the way back in. And then if I were to really strengthen the spring, then I might find on a second look, oh, wait a minute, the repetition lever's too high. The jack's going in easy, but it's not scraping the knuckle. It's lower than the knuckle at rest. You know, that's how too strong of or strengthening the spring after this point would affect it. That's why we set the springs beforehand, before doing this adjustment. So the order and regulation is pretty important if you want to avoid redundancy. Okay. Sitting here breathing in acetone in these hammers, or maybe even a little bit of lacquer that's kind of reconstituting if there's lacquer in these. Okay. Just kind of doing that same adjustment, the height of the repetition lever if you're just joining. And you're wondering, what's everyone doing here? Staring at this guy's head. Okay. The cost to prep a piano, well, isn't too bad in terms of when you look at it of a percentage of the cost of the piano itself. You know, this being probably a what, probably $115,000 piano or something, $110,000. And if a dealer had to spend $800 or $900 even 1,000 to have it prepped. You know, even combined with their other costs, it doesn't seem like that would be too bad, right? Right. All right, so all those are set. Now we can set the hammer line where we want. And what I'm going to do for that is, I don't want to put these too far away because we're going to put some in the black notes pretty soon. Got my sample sticking up here, right? But I'm going to stick this in the piano and put a gauge and pinch that gauge, distance gauge between the strings and the hammer in question. I'm going to set several samples. I'm going to set the note at the ends of each of the sections here. There's 4 sections on this piano. And then I'll set all the P's and E's in between and connect the dots in between. So let me show you what I mean. Let's see, is it, let's see, is it, oh, it's question time. Let me check the questions here as I'm setting up the tripod here so you can see down into the piano with me. Okay. So I'm going to be looking through the strings most often at those hammers as I pinch those gauges, okay, through the strings along here to set those samples. But let's check the chat. All right, we have, okay, Thespian 200 says, I bought a grand piano action model and learned regulation and practice with it. Hammer, strike distance, jack position and height, let off and drop, repetition spring and aftertouch, all the things that I'm doing. That's great. Yeah, so the action model is a great way to kind of just get it out and look at all the different components, really get them in your head, how the different adjustments work. I was always bothered, you know, I learned on action models a little bit, especially for a test that I took for the Piano Technicians Guild, you know, way back when I was learning. And then when I got to regulating full pianos, I thought, wait a minute, this is different than working on a 1-note or a 3-note jig a little bit. So I don't know if you've experienced that at all, the SBN 200, but yeah. So hey, thanks Jeffrey Boyle for signing in there, and thanks for watching. Okay, we'll go ahead and continue. Flip the camera around here. We're going to set our hammer line samples. Okay. Okay. In fact, I need to back the camera up where it's definitely not going to be in the way first. All right. So I chose, earlier when we evaluated this piano, I decided that we're going to set the distance at 41 millimeters, which is kind of not very much compared to what you might want on the, or compared to the spec. But yeah, it's my understanding that the spec on these is pretty subject to change as needed in that particular piano, you know. And it just so happens that when we want the dip, the key dip where we want, which is a bigger deal to me, playing the notes and ease of playing difficult repertoire and things. Once we set the key dip there, then we had to adjust the what do you call it? We had to adjust the hammer line here higher towards the strings for aftertouch, for more aftertouch. Okay. Or another way to put it, so that the action completes its cycle all the way. It has a little bit of follow through. Sometimes this gauge really just jumps out on me. It's no fun, but hey, it works though. Okay. It's changing a lot here. Raising that hammer quite a bit up. When I put the sensor rails back on with the electronics, some of the hammers I'll have to change this adjustment on them because that sensor rail can sometimes put pressure on it and change the height of the hammers that I already set. But it's just on a few on the ends and section, maybe one in the middle here and there, so it's not too bad. So if I set the hammer closer to the string, just talking through regulation with you here, if I set it closer to the string at rest, or think of it as its starting point. So the key's at its starting point, the key's all the way up, but then we change where the hammer starts, it's closer to the string, then does the hammer reach the string sooner or later in the key travel? Okay, so a good way to think about it. It's going to reach it sooner, right? Because it started closer to the strings, and it's going to travel at the same rate relative to the key. It's just starting closer. So that will mean that we reach it sooner in the stroke of the key, in the timing of the key, stroke of the key, we reach the string sooner. So there's more slosh room at the end, which we call aftertouch. You don't want a ton of aftertouch, just enough to make things work. If you don't have enough, the hammer will just bounce on that jack. It won't escape all the way from the knuckle. It'll just bounce and bobble, double strike and all that ugly stuff that we don't want. So, after I set this hammer line, or the samples, then I'll raise all the hammers up to that point, in between the samples. When I get down here, some pianos you can't do this on, but when I get down here, I can look through the action and the pin block here underneath, and I can see my gauge and the tops of the hammers. But some actions, it's really hard to see that, just the way it's set up. So sometimes it's not easy to set the samples this way. Sometimes you're kind of forced to set them by looking down through the strings and doing the best you can. It's harder to know when it's exactly level with your sample or with your gauge when you're looking down versus looking straight across the top of it. But it can be done, you know, relatively well. Okay, here's a B. I'm gonna raise up here. Some people might say, why don't you just set a couple samples, you know, in a section and just call it good? Well, one thing that happens when you try and make an adjustment across several hammers, like along a straight line, it's harder to do that over a longer stretch and not have error, not get off in one direction or another and start to slant or whatever, or have a dip in the middle or a rise in the middle.
And you know, that might not make a huge difference with the, you know, the distance you're actually setting it, but it will make some difference, and it won't look as good. Okay. The string heights, you could say, is the distance between the key bed here that the action rests on, and the bottom of the strings. And it's not a flat line, it curves a little bit with the bridge, depending on the bridge height. And the soundboard has some curve to it, so you kind of naturally get some curves going on there. Okay, got that. Okay, we're going to set the action on. I can set the key slip right here, which protects the finish, and that'll be kind of handy. And get these cheek blocks out of the way. And I'm going to set the action up on top here and use it as a higher workbench for me. All right. Plastic's in the way a little bit there. Okay. Get that out of our way. Okay, there's all our samples sticking up in the air, right? So we're going to just connect the dots. I like to go in the middle of the samples first to help me not get a dip or a rise in between them. And then you have to tap the hammer just a little bit like this to get it to settle where it's actually going to be once you take the tool off. And, well, take the tool off and tap, I should say. But otherwise, you'll see what I mean if you've ever tried to adjust this. It doesn't stay where you put it. It's kind of a delayed response to the turn of the screw down here, which is the capstan screw. And I'm going to bring the camera down here. You can kind of look at me for fun. Just look over the shoulder, since we can do different heights with this. And let's get this down lower here. Zoom in. There, now we're having fun. Okay. So I'm kind of looking across there, right? And I'll do one in the middle. And sometimes I'll wink. I'll just tap all three that are samples, and then the middle one that I'm setting, and look and see, is that a straight line in between them? Because like I said, sometimes these slant one way or another to follow the height of the strings. It's not a straight line across the horizon. You don't want it to be. You want it to match the distance between the hammer and the string. You want that to be consistent from note to note. Okay. This one jumped up on me a bit. Okay, now I'll set one in the middle here. Let's see if I can go
that. Usually my head would be right here, but I didn't want to get in your way. I can tell a really good regulation from a like okay beginner one by how well this hammer line usually is, you know, because all the other steps have to be kind of with the spring and the jack and all that have to be really good in order to get this to be, you know, a smooth hammer line, consistent like this. And on the Spirio, this really comes into play because I'm going to use this hammer line to tell me how to set the solenoid heights later. So I basically need like a perfect hammer line if I'm going to do that very well. Remember, I tell you how to tap things, you don't really know where they've ended up. Alright, let's keep moving you over. You can just follow along the next section here. Zoom out a bit. You can see me turning those capstans underneath. Some pianos have different types of capstans, but it's the same principle. You know, it's lifting the hammer to the string. And I have to keep the tool low profile so I don't come up and do damage right here. Side pressure on piano parts is no bueno because they break so easily when you push them to the side. They can take a lot of strain in the direction, you know, that they move normally, but not side to side. That's where things get broken with me. If something's gonna get broken, that's where it happens. This other one sticking up was a C. It was my C, and it changed a little bit because I changed the spring and all that. So I'm going off the B that I set. That's going to be more accurate, okay, if you're wondering. Maybe I said to set these at 40 and I just totally forgot. 40 millimeters. Hope not. Otherwise I might be raising my hammer line a bit to get things to work. I mean, it can happen. So here where it starts to kind of ramp up here, I'm going to check this slope, see if it's right. I'm going to check again with my B and my E, and then I'm going to set one in the middle to make sure those three are a straight line. Kind of catch my eye to see them all by just tapping them there. And I'm going to even out that slope a bit. There, so it's not so much of a ramp, it's more of a gradual slope now. I can do the same thing here at the end. Things moved around a little bit. So, here we go. With the light tap, that's key. Right light tap on the key, that's key. Get it? Yeah, that's the secret to this. Okay. That and removing your tool for the check. Oh, I almost broke something there, but I didn't. I have a spare, but if you're wondering. So far these are behaving pretty good. If I saw one that would not just come to rest at the same place each time eventually after kind of tapping it, then I would know I need to revisit that repetition height with the jack. And I would need to kind of tweak it a little bit. There we go. Smooth. Carry on here. Move the camera with me here. Come from the side there. Okay. Let's see, what time are we at? Second dinner yet? Not quite. I think actually I'm gonna call this. I'm not gonna. I had hopes like, oh, I'll finish this today. I'm not gonna finish it today. So I might not go as far as I thought I could originally. Right on. Okay. I think this sample's a little high. Ended up a little higher than. So sometimes I don't believe the samples and I tweak it. This hammer's twisted weird compared to its neighbors. You see that? I have to fix that. This one, it's twisted over to the right. So that's kind of weird. We'll fix that though. We'll fix it. I like setting hammer line. Satisfying. It also means usually that you're getting really close to being done regulating. So. Okay, this one kind of doesn't want to totally come to rest in the same place every time when I'm tapping it. Sometimes it stops higher, sometimes a little lower. It's just a tiny bit though, so I'm just going to lower the rep lever just a tiny bit. And then usually this will lower, maybe a little more. Check the, make it out of there. Kind of see what it's doing. Yeah, let's go a little lower. There, let's try that. Now, usually when it fixes, then it'll rest at the lower point each time. So that when you raise it, then it'll be right. But this one is kind of different, so maybe I don't quite have the best spot still, but that's pretty good. They kind of stabilize over time too as the piano's played in. Kind of wear an indent where that sits, and it sits a little better over time. At least from what I've seen. My experience on these pianos anyway. One thing that can happen though is the hammers will slowly go further down as the parts get compacted. They'll go further down, and then you need to kind of raise them up again a little bit. Okay. All right then. Okay, so we're getting there. It's about 5 minutes to the hour. If you have anything you wanted to mention, put it on the chat. And I'll check that, and we'll have a little, just respond to anything that's there. And then I think at that point, I'm going to call it a night. And then hit it again tomorrow in between things. But so where do we go from here? Well, I've got the two main factors set of key travel, except I didn't do it in the black notes yet. I've got to refine that. But I've got the key travel set in the whites, and I've got the hammered blow distance set, okay? Those are the two biggies. Now I'm going to do let off. Meanwhile, our hammers are harder. That damping is not great. We're going to have to fix that at the end. But first I'm going to set let off, then drop. And that's, I'll show you what that is if you don't know when we get to it. And it's not so much setting it as checking it and just refining it. Most of these are already where we need them to be. Some just a little low and whatnot. And then I'll go through and feel, after I set let off, I'll go through and feel that step down after the ledge. And I'll refine it, pull punchings out, add punchings to make it all really consistent note to note. Okay. And then from there, we'll start looking at the voicing. And yeah, I'll have to make little fixes like that one hammer that was leaning too far over and getting too close to its neighbor, stuff like that. I might shape the hammers briefly just to get a little bit better shape on the top. Make the hammers to the strings, and we'll voice, tune voice, then set up the player. The tone where it's at a good starting place now to just finesse a little bit that tone so it's not quite so metallic on some. Like that one. A lot of these are good. So yeah, it's going in a great place, and we'll have fun with it, and then we'll get the player playing. there's not quite enough aftertouch on the whites. I think it's because I was going to set it to 40 instead of 41 and I just forgot. So I might end up just bumping those up another millimeter, the hammer line. And yeah, I'll do it carefully. I'm going to do it because the player system really relies on that distance to recreate the performances. It needs to know exactly what, to the millimeter, what that distance is in order to calibrate itself well and have the same kind of dynamic curve to it. So, so I might change that a bit. Yeah, first thing, and then we'll go from there. But these are cool little pianos, very cool. And thanks for hanging out with me today. And let's check the chat, see if there was any questions here before we sign off. Let's see. Here we go. Nope. Everyone is at peace. All right, everyone. I leave you in peace. All right, we'll talk to you. We'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot.